Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to first off introduce myself. I'm Tom Banky, and I work with Forward Community Investments. I wanted to welcome everyone to our Building Nonprofit Sustainability, a Financial Learning Series kickoff webinar. As Ben had mentioned previously when he first got on, you can listen through your computer or you can dial in on the number that is listed as you can see the screen here. I just wanted to go through today's agenda. First off, we would like to welcome everybody. Ben is going to do a thank you for our sponsors. We'll do a little bit about who we are at FCI, a baseline evaluation, as well as an overview of the learning series, kind of giving an idea as to what each session will be. We'll also be introducing some pre-work reading before the next session next week, and then we'll have a question and answer portion of the webinar. So I guess I'll hand it over to Ben to do some sponsor thank yous.
Great, thank you very much, Tom. You know, one thing just to note, that we reserved about an hour for today's session. I don't anticipate it to take that full amount of time to have a little bit of extra space for lunch, but please do feel free to submit any questions as we go throughout this or between now and our first session. We're always happy to take any at any time. Just to start, and I think this is a really important thing that we underline, how grateful we are for the support we receive from our funders. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to host these learning series and provide these opportunities to you as participants. And so we're very indebted to the CUNA Mutual Foundation for their continued support of our series this year and last year, as well as Summit Credit Union. And new this year, the Godorsey Companies has been supporting us, and with the combination of each of these funders collaborating together, that allows us to deliver this series to you. So thank you very much to our wonderful supporters of these organizations.
Thanks, Ben. And then I'll just kind of give a little bit of information about FCI. Forward Community Investments is a community loan fund that builds capacity in nonprofits across the state through low-cost loans and expert advisory services. As the most established financial management advisor of its kind in Wisconsin, FCI provides its clients with guidance, resources, skills, and capacity building as a means of building a strong, secure, and sustainable statewide nonprofit community. Our vision is a strong, secure, and sustainable nonprofit community throughout Wisconsin. We transform communities by building capacity in mission-based organizations through leveraging low-cost capital, expert advisory services, and timely resources. We do this with integrity and through a commitment to excellence by being good stewards and a foundation of both innovation and collaboration. And going a little bit further into what we do, for those of you who aren't familiar with FCI, let me tell you a little bit about us and the work that we do. FCI has been around for almost 20 years. We are chartered by the U.S. Department of Treasury as a Community Development Financial Institution, or a CDFI. Historically, and as a CDFI, we are a lender providing access to capital to nonprofits serving low to moderate income individuals. We have always provided training and technical assistance to borrowers, and over the last few years we've expanded that learning and development beyond borrowers to formalize it into advisory services. Today our organization is delineated into 4 areas. Those areas are advisory services, investments, lending services, and research initiatives. Advisory services includes learning, such as this series, and one-to-one advising in the areas of capacity building, financial assessment, business planning, and strategy development. As a CDFI, we need to raise capital to lend. Investments earn a competitive rate of return, and our investors include financial institutions, nonprofits, religious organizations, and other socially responsible individuals. As I mentioned, we are known as a lender providing access to capital through attractive terms and/or conditions that conventional lenders typically won't consider. We offer both loans and lines of credit for new construction, acquisition, and rehabilitation of existing facilities, leasehold improvements, pre-development, equipment, and working capital. FCI is engaged in research initiatives over the last 5 years producing a statewide nonprofit economic impact report that Ben will be referencing shortly. Last year, FCI merged with the Wisconsin Community Fund, a grassroots grant-making organization, in order to expand our ability to impact communities by integrating lending, advising, and grant-making services. Well, enough about us, so let's talk about you. Let's learn a little bit about who is in the cohort by using the tools in the GoToMeeting. Please answer the following poll question about your role with the organization who you will be representing.
Great, so I think Tom is kicking us off with that poll that's open. So if you can submit whether you're an executive director, a staff member, or board member of the organizations that you're here to represent. Tom, how many people do we have on the line so far right now?
As of right now, we have 21 folks who are joining us. I'd say about little over half of them would fall into the executive director category. Close second would be just under 50% with staff members of these organizations.
Okay, great. And thank you and welcome again for everyone that's here and joining us today. So if we continue, I want to talk first. We want to understand best what you want to get out of the series. So as we go through today, I'm going to provide an overview of each of the learning series topics and the target goals that we have. But please submit what you would like to learn most from the learning series in the question box, either at any point as we go through or when we get to the end for the Q&A. And I'd like to just hear kind of what you're thinking. To give just a broad and general overview, and Tom mentioned a lot of the different types of work that we provide. As a lender and also in our advisory services, we found that there's often a gap between the knowledge and skill base that organizations had when it came to managing their financial capacity, and that we had an opportunity as experts in that field to provide that learning to both borrowers and non-borrowers. Our advisory services groups began about 4 years ago from a grant through the Department of Children and Families to provide workshop learnings on different topics. That's really how this series began. Last year was the first year that we provided the series as an integrated group of courses to really tie together building your capacity as an organization along with building specific financial tools such as a budget, program costing, managing your cash flow, and measuring your organization using larger financial metrics. And together with that, we were really able to tie in a lot of the topics that would impact organizations, and we've done this, and we've listed out a few different ways that we do that. One is the in-session classroom learning, which we'll be holding about once per month as a 4-hour session. In that learning, there's a case study, which is actually of a borrower of FCI's that we've changed in some cases dramatically, but to illustrate how these different topics interrelate with your organization. This case study, again, is just an illustration. We're going to be focusing as much as possible on how do you apply this learning that we take in the class to your organization. And we'll be doing that through breakout sessions during the classes, as well as in Q&As and pre and post homework afterwards to get the most out of it. One of the things that we found through our own sessions, both as teachers and as participants, is that it gets really exciting when you're learning the material right away, but then when you're applying it at your organization, it's much tougher to do it. So we want to make sure we spend a lot of time in the sessions about how to apply it, and then we'll also be supplementing that with other tools and resources, including ways to apply it using templates, using strategy guides. Through individual coaching, we'll be signing up each participating organization for different times to meet with us on a one-to-one basis to discuss what are those specific challenges that are facing me as an organization and how can I move forward with that. And lastly, we also have a virtual leadership series as webinars that we provide throughout the state of Wisconsin, and we strongly encourage that you also attend those. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, tomorrow is our next session with David Bornstein, a New York Times columnist and author about social innovation. I think it'll be a great session that people should I recommend registering for it and listening to it. It should be a great, interesting conversation.
Yes, Ben, you are correct. We are having that webinar tomorrow afternoon. It's actually going to be taking place the same exact time as this webinar from noon until 1 p.m. If you are interested in getting a little bit more information about this webinar, feel free to go to our website, and under the Events tab, you can follow the upcoming webinars. Otherwise, you can just email me, and I'd be happy to forward that information along to you.
Great. And there's a quote on the bottom of this page about what sustainability means and what we're really seeking to achieve through this session. We found that the mission-based organizations and nonprofits have a high skill level in delivering programs, and we really believe in the work that we do. But to really be sustainable, we need to combine that ability to deliver on our mission with our ability to generate the resources to do it. And that's really the general focus and perspective that we take on this learning series. We want to give you the tools so that you're able to deliver your mission as effectively as possible. One question that we've been receiving a lot through the application process is who should be attending from my organization? I think the first and foremost, the executive director ideally will be able to attend every single session. I think as the leader of the organization, they're in the best position to evaluate how these things can fit for you. Having program staff leaders and finance managers attend from your own internal team is also strongly recommended. And finally, having board members attend. I think the board often isn't as aware of what's going on day to day, week to week with an organization's operations, and being able to attend these sessions and work with you to think, how can I apply this to my organization, really provides them with some increased insight. And I think the organizations that took away the most from this series in last year's learning series were those that had a mix of both board, staff, and executive director leadership at each of the sessions. So in each session, you can have 2 to 3 members attend, and it can rotate who's there. Obviously, board members may not be able to commit as much time as internal staff members to these things, and so you can select based on either the course material or scheduling availability who attends. But I'd strongly recommend that you maximize the number of people that are coming, whether it's the same person or someone else at each one. One thing that Tom mentioned earlier, and I want to just pre-position, on the first day we'll be taking a short baseline evaluation to understand what is our current level of skill and capacity as financial and organizational leadership based on each of these topics. The reason we do this is to assess how well we've done at providing you with the tools and resources to adapt to your environment. So we'll be taking another evaluation at the end of the series to see how much you've gained throughout the 6 months that we have together, and then also through follow-ups at 2, 4, and 6 months after the learning series is completed to check in and see how are things going, what are you applying, what questions do you have, how can we help. And so it's really critical that we get this feedback for our system so that we're able to speak to our funders about the important impacts that we're making as well as to our other stakeholders. It also is a good source of perspective for you as a participant to see when you evaluate at the end, what have I gained from this? Has this been helpful for me? What have I learned most? What do I still have left to do in my organization? So this next slide has a list of each of the sessions and their dates. And I'm just going to give a little bit more detail on each of these first, but I want to emphasize that the order of which we've chosen to deliver the sessions is very important and intentional. We're beginning with talking about building the capacity of your organization as a whole, and that's really about assessing, based on your missions, your programs, your board, your staff teams, your financial sustainability, how successful are we and what impact are we having based on each of these elements. So this is really a comprehensive look at your organization. We then move into talking about integrating strategy into your finances and how to do that on a day-to-day basis as opposed to just once every 3 years and really integrating it into your organization. And we find that of those areas of capacity, strategy is often one of the ones that lags behind the program delivery and other areas for organizations. And so starting with this here and then focusing on how we can integrate it is where the next topics, which are more financially related, really come in. So how do we create budgets that will align us with a successful program outcomes? How do we make sure that we're moving in the right track? Calculating true program costs, and then how do we understand what the cost of our services are and what we need to generate in terms of funding to deliver them. Managing cash flow is an important way of predicting when are those challenging points going to face our organization in the future. And then finally, in the last session, to really tie it all together, we're talking about what kind of measures should I be tracking and looking at and monitoring to make sure my organization is going to be successful both now and 3 years from now. What will it take to be sustainable?
And so let's go back into, since we designed kind of how the sessions are going to go, I just kind of wanted to open things up to you guys, and I just want to let you know what you want to get most out of the learning series. So if you could go to your questions box, that should be in the webinar display screen, and just let us know what most you want to get out of the learning series.
Great, thank you, Tom. And while you're considering your answers, I just want to go into a little more detail on each of these sessions in specific. Again, the first session, Building Capacity is Building Success. That's the one that we'll be having next week on Wednesday, is really understanding what capacity building means for an organization, reviewing a framework to really explore those elements of effectiveness, and then find tools that can help you assess your capacity and also plan for how to develop and move forward. At the end of this session, as we talked about before, with the tools and resources we provide, we'll provide you with those very assessment and action planning tools that we use with our clients so that you can apply them within your organization. The second session, again, on integrating strategy for sustainability. I think one important thing is to combine your budget, which is really your strategy translated into financial terms, with your strategic plan, which is your mission-based strategy for how you're going to make an impact in your community. We're going to introduce some of the other topic areas that we'll be focusing on later, how to use an integrated dashboard of key finance and mission indicators, how to use a dual bottom line matrix, which understands the impact that your programs have, which can be high or low in some cases, and also the impact that it has on your sustainability. As an example, some programs are high impact. They really are what your organization is about, but they operate at a deficit, and that deficit needs to be subsidized by other programs that you run, such as fundraising, most importantly, but also other programs that generate surpluses. And how does that balance work in your organization? So really understanding how to create that constellation of organizational programs that delivers some sustainable impact. And I think one of the big focuses for that day on strategy will be on our real-time strategic planning model, which is the model that we use with our clients. And it's really about integrating strategy on a day-to-day basis. So it's a thought-making and thinking and decision-making tool, as opposed to just a multi-page document that becomes either out of use or not relevant anymore several years down. So when you're thinking about who to attend each session, we just kind of want to review the agendas for each one so you get a feel. I feel like the first two sessions on the building capacity and integrating strategy, it's a great opportunity to bring board members to the meetings if possible, as well as program staff leaders and the executive directors. The next three sessions are really where we start focusing in on those financial measures for your organization. Budgeting for success is really learning about the different types of budgets that you can provide, whether it be line item budgets, capital budgets, program-based budgets. We'll talk about how to adapt and adopt to using a mission-based approach to budgeting, which connects both the program outcomes and outputs of what services are being provided with the budget costs that are being done, understanding how to segregate those program costs from another, and then also, very importantly, how to use the budget to establish cash reserves for your organization so that you can remain sustainable in the future. The calculating true program cost, this is really about eliminating confusion that surrounds the terms of overhead. And I think we've all seen that there's a lot of different definitions that organizations use, so we'll try to distill this to the most clear and concise mode, and we'll find the easy ways to allocate the program costs that we have to our organization in a way that's both suitable for what we're doing and acceptable for our stakeholders and funders. And this is where, again, we'll focus on that dual bottom line matrix of understanding what programs cost and what they deliver for your organization. The fifth session on managing cash flow, this is really understanding how we can project forward our cash flow considerations and use that to create an accurate tool that can help us predict future challenges that we might have. One thing that we often say is that there's a difference between a cash flow problem, which is really about the timing that funds come in, and a budget problem, which is just a simple lack of cash. I think all nonprofit organizations feel that crunch of needing more cash, but how you align what activities you're providing and when, and who you can reach out to amongst your stakeholders can really impact the fluctuations that you have in terms of your cash reserves and cash balances. And that can really change and transform your ability to reach your mission better by focusing less and less on day-to-day cash issues and more on long-term, how do we provide the best services to our clients. And then finally, our sixth session is on dashboards and really understanding what we need to do to deliver those services to organizations on a mission level, on a financial level, on a program level, and how do we communicate that in a concise way that doesn't overwhelm them. So at board meetings, how can we provide those key details and key metrics that really apply to our organization? How do we do that for our staff so that they understand what's going on in our organization now and what are those key things we need to be focusing on? And also importantly, how do we communicate with our funders and our community stakeholders to show them what's new and what's of concern and how can they help in really delivering the impact that we're seeking to reach. So next thing I wanted to turn to is some of that pre-reading and homework that Tom mentioned before. There's two articles that I'd strongly encourage you to take a look at. They're very short, very concise, but I think they'll provide a great context for what we'll be achieving throughout the series. The first is the nonprofit life cycle stages, knowing what's normal and what's next. The Fieldstone Alliance is a great resource of nonprofit research tools, research from a variety of different sources, and they often summarize it and provide a really concise look at it. They use a cycle of life stages of where does my organization fit in terms of is it an early stage, it's just newly come to fore in terms of its formation, its idea, you may have only one program, or are you a more mature organization that has a different set of needs and issues and you've been well established, but now it's what do we need to do to change our programming to reach that impact the most? And then other organizations that are approaching a later stage where they need to really look at and review and renew their organization are facing a point where is this program really affecting the change that we want? Are we receiving the funding that we need, or is this something that needs a dramatic shift and change? And so understanding where you are in this life cycle of organizational change really influences the types of challenges and decisions that you have. And this article just provides a summary of those just so you can keep that in your mind as we're talking about how do we apply these tools and resources to my organization. Having this sense of where you are in life cycles is a really helpful thing. The second article, An Executive Director's Guide to Financial Leadership. This was published about 2 years ago by our sister organization of ours in Minnesota, the Nonprofit Assistance Fund, and it lists out the differences between financial management and financial leadership and what that means for you as an organizational leader and what it means for you as an organization as a whole. And I think that context is really great for especially the financial topics we'll be covering, but also how does using these tools and resources apply to me as an organizational leader, whether that be as a board member, a staff member, or an executive director. I think it's really relevant. And so we'll provide links to these materials for all of you to read before we come together, and we'll have a short discussion of that as a group just to see what you found as most interesting or effective in it. So Tom, that really covers all of the major points that I wanted to get through in terms of orienting you to the session. And so I'd like to open this up to a chat. Is there anything else that you want to know before we begin our next session, our first session, this upcoming Wednesday? Please feel free to type that in the box. Otherwise, we can talk about some of the outcomes that organizations, people have mentioned, and we can kind of.
We do have a great question. Sorry to interrupt you there, Ben. One of the questions that was brought up that I'm sure a lot of people are asking or thinking of at least is which of the 6 sessions would be most beneficial for a board member to attend?
You know, I think board members can gain a lot from all these sessions. You know, even though some of the financial topics might seem like they're more nuts and bolts and it's better for staff, I think it's also a valuable time for board members to see how do these things apply to me and my organization that I'm representing. Of that, though, I would say the best ones for board members to attend would probably be the first session on building capacity or the second session on integrating strategy, because the role of a board in those decisions is so key. But really, I would say that any of these sessions could be valuable for them.
And then just some more comments about what some of you guys want to get out of the training. A lot of it is built around capacity building and strategy are two primary interest areas. Probably just to get a better understanding of daily financial operations and capacity to allow for developing smart practices and strategies for the long term.
That's a great question. That's a great point, and I think one of the things that we'll be doing is having breakout points where we're talking about how do we use this for our organization, how do we make it practical. I think that's really a key point to have.
That's pretty much all the comments that we have at this time.
Okay. Oh, one just popped in to me about whether materials are going to be available. Yes, we're actually going to have a website dedicated specifically to the cohort, and this is where we'll be posting all of our resources, both the presentations, the participant guides, the handouts and worksheets that we'll actually be going through, as well as any other secondary resources that we'd recommend you take a look at. And I think that's a really useful way to connect with other organizations that are going through these challenges with us, and also for you to reference and send to staff members that aren't able to attend a specific session.
Ben, is there anything that folks should bring along to the first session?
That's a great question. For many of the sessions, there will be things that we'll want you to bring. In our applications, we ask that you submit your budgets, your audits, and those will really be important as we start looking at some of the financial topics later. But for the first session, just come with an open mind and be ready to participate and work together. It'll be a very lively session, and it'll be one full of discussion. We try to spend as little time as possible teaching out to you, and we want to make it more of a discussion and a working together to learn. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, I just want to give a logistics reminder. Again, our first session is next week on July 24th, 8 a.m. to 12. It's at the CUNA Mutual Conference Center. It's on Mineral Point Road. Many people often ask which of the CUNA buildings there are because there's quite a few of them in there. It's the Circle building. As you go in, it's where, if you're familiar with it, the cafeteria and the general group building, but it's the one that looks most like a circle as you enter in the group. We're really looking forward to being there. Dennis Johnson will also be joining us for the session next week. And we're really excited to have you again. And as Tom and I mentioned before, if you do have other questions related to either the first session or the series in general, please do reach out to us. We're more than happy to check in and follow up with you. All right, so if there isn't anything else, thank you again so much for joining us, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week.
There was just one more question that just popped in when we were kind of doing the closing here, and there was a question about what website to go to get this information, and it is actually on our fci.org website, but during that first session next week, we'll be giving out directions on how to set up your own unique username and password and things like that where you can access that information. So just kind of sit tight on that, and we'll be going over that information next week.
And we'll have a computer there, so during the breaks, you'll be able to actually set that all up, and you'll be ready to go by the end of the first session. So great. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful Mondays, and have a good week, and we'll see you next week on Wednesday.
Take care, everyone.
The organizer has